Hey guys, this is Eric Harris with Eric Harris Photography. Today I wanted to walk you through some of our steps that we do for our newborn sessions that we host just outside of Philadelphia. So waste no time, jump right into it. So first things I like to do when I start looking at an image is going through the background to make sure we get rid of any super obvious things such as hair or fuzz, different things like that. It's a lot easier, in my opinion, to remove these in post than it is to try to do this during the session, even using a lint roller, especially when you're working with babies. I think their time is just a little bit more important to worry about, make sure getting them happy and everything, than making sure everything's perfect right away. This is relatively easy using the clone stamp or the healing brush, depending on what you're working with, to remove these tiny little specks that are going to be on the fabric that you're using. You can see I like to zoom in and zoom out. I take a look. Not everything needs to be super perfect, but if it stands out a little bit, we'll just get rid of it. It's much easier to do that. Now here I'm selecting a part of the fabric that popped out. Again, this is relatively easy to do, especially with the software today in Photoshop and things like that. It's much easier to fix this afterwards than to potentially wake the baby up, move them around, have them upset. So here we're going to go through what our AI fill came up with. Found a decent one. We'll get started with it. Usually from here we'll go in and to kind of touch things up a little bit. Now in my opinion, while the AI work is pretty much fantastic, you still need to feather in edges, kind of clean things up, make sure they're pretty good. Now in this particular case, I don't need the background to be exactly perfect because I will be applying a smoothing type of filter to the entire background. One, to isolate the subject a little bit, and two, to just help clean up little imperfections that are pretty difficult to get rid of. So here, I do like a little bit of the wrinkling that's in the background of the drop that we used. However, we're going to get rid of some of the more obvious ones that were kind of distracting in my opinion. Now to achieve the perfect round look for a baby when they're wrapped is almost impossible to get without a little bit of digital work here. I'm going to use the clone stamp tool, kind of go right around the edge, get rid of some of the wrinkling that I don't like, and try to make things line up a little bit better. If you open up your clone stamp tab, you can change the direction that your cloned subject is, which is what I'm going to do here, where instead of -7.4 we're going to bump it. I think I end up going a little bit positive actually in a degree, and to allow it to kind of blend a little bit better. Now you'll see I do frequently zoom out and look at the photo overall to make sure I'm happy with how everything looks. In this case, we're going to go into our liquify and start moving the baby's shape around to kind of create the little bit more rounded look. With the way their feet were here, we're going to have a little bit of a bump no matter what, and that's okay. I don't think they don't need to be superly perfect egg shaped. I think there's a time and place for that. The way the baby wanted to be wrapped didn't really allow for us to have the legs tucked in all the way perfect. So in this case, we're going to work with this, and I think it looks pretty good. So here we're just kind of bumping out, rounding it off just a tiny bit, just to try to get it a little bit more perfect. Now when we get to our baby's face, we do discuss with the parents what features that they would like to keep. We don't want to accidentally remove a birthmark or something like that. In this case, the baby had relatively clean skin, so what we're going to do is go through and get rid of the tiny little flakes using mostly the healing brush here. Sometimes we use a clone stamp tool if we're kind of close to the lips or near a wrinkle under, like around the chin or something like that. But we're gonna get bulk of the bigger flakes of skin or hair or anything like that off of the baby, including the little glares that you see from maybe like tears or something like that. Now I don't focus too much on this because we do use a bit of a skin smoothing filter over the baby. That kind of mitigates some of this already, but some of the bigger ones it's nice to get rid of up front. Usually just creates a little bit more of a clean look after filters and things like that are applied. So you see with bigger scratches like this, which happens all the times with the babies, they always scratch around their eyes. You're gonna make sure you continue the crease of the eyelid. That way you don't accidentally remove a little bit too much of that, because if you do, things start to tend to look a little funny. So we want to try to obviously keep things as natural as possible for our babies. Now, I know there are a bunch of different ways to achieve this type of edit. Again, I'm personally a fan of the healing brush and clone stamp tool. Those are pretty much the two that I use the most. Sometimes the patch tool kind of works just as well. Everyone has their own little bit of a flow to it, but they usually achieve very similar results from my experience. Now, once I get the skin pretty close to what I like, this is where I'm going to work with using some of my AI tools to get started. I personally use the AI Skin 3.0 by Sparkle Stock, which I got through Envato Elements. They're an asset company that I'm not sponsored by or anything, but I do use them for a lot. So I did speed up the process. Depending on your machine that you're editing on, it might take a little longer for it to run. While I was screen recording, it took about 30 to 40 seconds to apply the effect. There you can kind of pull back the opacity if you like, or brush some of the effects on or off. It does a pretty good job nailing everything up front. Now I have a tendency to like to sharpen my baby's eyes, nose, lips, things like that. Even though any kind of skin softening filters do not apply to those, I like to add a little bit extra to it. Especially if they plan on printing, it kind of helps just make sure details are retained. It looks really nice. In this case here, we're using the Visualize mask. Sometimes it's easier to apply the filters overall and then remove. Just kind of depends on what you're working with. In this case, it doesn't look like it, but here we're actually removing some of the applied filter here, just to have it a little closer to the actual creases of the eyebrows and things like that. Again, we're always zooming out, taking a look at the overall image before we zoom back in. It's very easy to get lost in a tiny little section of the baby's face or their clothing or something like that. Now here what we're going to do is rotate the photo. In this case, we're going to tilt it about 35, maybe 40 degrees, just to kind of give it a little bit of a dimensional look. What's nice is we could use a generative expand and kind of fill in a little bit and then kind of clean it up from there. This is extremely helpful if you don't have a very large working area in your studio or at home. Sometimes we have to do this if we go to a client's house and we have to work with just what's available in the living room or maybe the baby's bedroom. So here we're going to see the corners kind of fill in. They're going to look almost perfect. Again, we are smoothing the background a little bit, which is going to hide some of these imperfections that we kind of can see. So what we're going to do is go through and select the baby itself through a subject select. Almost always does a perfect job grabbing them. Might need to fine tune it a little bit. But here we have the baby isolated. We're going to invert the selection and then save it. So here, I don't know if you've ever done this, but you can save selection and you could load this back up later on, which is great if you're working with masks that are specific to our subject. So here I have a smoothing action that I created, that I saved. Basically, it will isolate the background, remove the baby from there, or the subject in this case, just the subject, and then fill the whole layer in with basically a solid background, using just the colors and shapes of the just the background that it has selected. Here we're going to reload the subject mask that we had earlier. And now we're going to brush that smoothing layer on. And it's going to look funny at first, especially if you go on at 100%. Basically, this will eliminate any texture they have at all, but that's not what we're going to do. So here, once we brush over the entire layer, we're going to pull the opacity back of that layer to usually around 30%, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the fabric. I don't want to remove everything from this because then it just looks a little bit too fake. But having something like this will help hide imperfections, kind of make the baby pop a little bit more without being over the top super processed. So here we have one of our delivered items. There may be some touch-ups here and there that we might do afterwards. So thank you guys so much for taking a look at our newborn steps. I hope you gained something from it. If you do anything different, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. Thanks, guys.